All right, lots of business up on the board because I wanted to do it all before I start to talk about it. Now, this is all on the tip of my tongue. I've had 3 clients, patients this morning where we're talking about whether it's pre-surgical, post-surgical, run up into surgery. There's a lot of implications that process has, but I think if we can get into the topics and the discussions that I have in mind, we'll see that it applies across the board. So we start very much on the left with these highly orthopedically medical graded processes, but then it translates all the way over here, way over there to performance as it relates to linking the goals of what you put into your body, whether it's in your mouth or through some other means, nutrition and supplementation, and how it is simply not optional to provide a service of one piece but not have any awareness of the other. Before I get into this, clearly, I think it's very fair when you're at a lot of them are indeed bottom-feeding levels of human performance services. I'm talking about commercial physical therapy. I'm talking about in-network medical services. A lot of times when people are in those spaces, because they're getting customers, that's what they are, they're customers that are just going because they're being told to go, not because they actually want a very keen level of service, they're going to say, well, they don't want to deal with training if it's a medical piece. They don't want to deal with nutrition. They just want their pain to go away, or they just want to lose weight or whatever. At the end of the day, take away the specific topics. There's always going to be a force multiplier. There's always going to be something that happens before what you're good at or what you're passionate about or what you're selling or what you love doing. If you do something before that, it will make what you do better. There's always going to be something that happens after what you do that'll always make it feel better. I think it's very fair to say that it's impossible for any one human being to be able to apply all of these different services and expertise. But it is very, very possible that when you're the gatekeeper, when you're basically the general contractor to building the human house, you can know about a lot of different things. When you hire a general contractor to build a house, they may not know exactly what the plumber is going to do when he fits this pipe into that pipe, but he or she does know how to audit the work that they do and how to bring all of the different services together, because the plumber may not know everything, but he knows how to do what he does best. And the general contractor brings this all together. So what we're going to talk about today, because again, it's on the tip of my tongue, getting these folks ready or helping them understand maybe why the surgical recovery process is not going in the way that they thought it should go, is really talking about what people put into their body, nutrition and supplementation. And it's not necessarily nutrition or supplementation advice. The advice is to have that expert on your team, and this is why you should have them on your team. It's a challenge. Just like it's always a challenge to get anybody to work together, because most people think that what they do is the most important piece of the puzzle. Well, I'm coming from a perspective that I'm not doing anything here. I'm standing up here and I'm looking down and I'm the puppet master, and I'm going to suggest that when I see this process happen, the best result. It is not isolated only for the super wealthy or professional athletes. There can be different layers and levels to how we access a combination of medical service, fitness, sleep, nutrition, psychology, and load management. If you like 6 different words, if you like those, great. Those are the buckets that I would reach into to start to manage a process. And you're going to need at least 3 or 4 different people minimum to apply those 6 different interventions. If you like 3, if you like 4, you like different words, it's fine. But let's understand that most of the time, somebody who's really, really good at one is probably at best simply aware of the importance of another. They may not be good at it in a lousy situation that what makes what we're going to talk about probably very, very useful, they're not even aware or they just don't care. Oh, that's not what I do. Years ago, I was teaching a seminar in Orange County. And a chiro, very, very well known in the education community for a particular brand. And I was so glad that he chose to come to my seminar. I was like, man, and you know what? If I wanted my neck cracked and got some good heavy hands, that is an excellent individual to use. And he's also just a pleasant person to be around, which I think is also important. He came to me after the seminar. Of course, I used him as an example during multiple times to demonstrate. Remember, this is probably like 2013, so I may have been a little bit less polished in how I would communicate things because I wanted to demonstrate, hey, look, yeah, you can do all the manual therapy that you want, but look, he's already, like, he just told me he was 4 times, better, because chiros always use percentages. He's like, I'm 40% better, and we didn't even touch him. And we just put him in different positions and showed different exercises. He put his arm around me when we were done, and he says, listen, Charlie, I get it now. Like, listen, all I do is name of the commercial brand, manipulation, and soft tissue. I don't get into this other stuff, but at least I see now that there's more to it than just what I do. And this was a very, very veteran, extremely well accomplished, but most importantly, a nice guy. Because for somebody to say that, and again, I'm not saying his name and I'm not saying the commercial model, all you know is Orange County. This is gonna be a lot of people. That was able to be humble enough to know that other things matter. Now, what does this look like to you? We are talking about this very, very unique and magical ski slope, where we have green, blue, and black diamonds, okay? We've got our bunny hills, our medium hills, and our black diamonds, our badass ones. Now, most of the time, if there is not an injury process, or a post-surgical an illness, a pathology, something that is relatively close to the edges of allostasis, bordering on homeostasis, meaning something is not well within the middle range, I'm going to consider those the black diamonds. So they're not always in play, but they're the wild card here. So when we look here, you got the greens, and I tried to draw these where the greens don't have a ton of variations or big loops, etc. The black ones certainly do, because they're the wild card. That's when a lot of things start to matter maybe differently. Nothing ever matters more. The concepts don't change, but we do have to reposition some of the priorities here when it comes to nutrition and supplementation. Obviously the blue is the medium. Now, I'm going to write down here where in this magical ski slope, what is the target when you finish, what happens, or what is the target tissue of the nutrition and supplementation, which we will narrow down to here, which is, again, why you should use some level of expertise. I'm just telling you why I think it's important. If you also think it's important, just like we talk about referring out to physiotherapists and chiropractors and orthopedists when you're a trainer, or when you're a physiotherapist, you work great with surgeons. People always ask me, like, what am I learning more about? What am I getting into? Is this, how do we get into other spaces and create the same core values and just have a different weapon targeted at the exact same problem? Now, let's start with the little bunny hills, okay? So the bunny hills are the easiest. They're the ones that on this magical ski slope, they're the ones that are the most popular, okay? So when we're over here on this one, it lands at the heart, okay? And over here, it lands in the kidneys. And over here, it lands in the liver. And over here, let's say it lands in the spleen. You get the point. On the bunny hills, those hills, when you land, or maybe if we put something up here and it trickles down, it lands in the internal organs. Now, they're the most popular ski slopes on this hill because those are the most important. Your body will always prioritize all of its biology so you don't die. All adaptations are valuable so you don't die, okay? So we may find adaptations or processes to be desirable or undesirable in the acute phase, but long term, the reason why the body does these things is so you don't die. They hold the priorities here. So we're talking about the visceral organs, the brain, things that are highly, highly medical. Now you'll notice I have four, one, two, three, four also of the blue, the medium hills. So now we're gonna say this goes to the skeletal muscle. Okay, this is different than cardiac muscle. So these are going to muscles that you could also be going to smooth muscle, and I'm narrowing this down. We're talking in this basic level so we can trickle down to the level of specificity that works for your situation, your context, your population. So let's look at here. So we're going to go lower body here. We got another one going to lower body. Over here we got upper body and upper body. So unless there's pathology, which orthopedic recovery can be considered a form of, is this significant inflammatory process, one that was necessary after whatever was handled. These are now the only two, and your body will always prefer, if there is a biological resource, which we'll get to, the biological resource will always go to the bunny hills before it goes to the medium hills. Now you got the wild cards in place. Now you have pathology. You've got a total knee replacement. Okay. Over here you got an ACL. Over here you've got an illness. Over here exhaustion. So your training process, which might have been associated with some inefficient nutrition and supplementation. Now you have this major thing that probably would be one priority below the medical stuff. So for instance, if your body has a choice to delegate biological resources, it will do that to the visceral organs, number one, so you don't die. Then if there's a wild card in place, it will go to the healing tissue or the compensating tissue or symptom. Then thirdly, which is often second, it will be to hopefully growing lean muscle, but at least not losing any lean muscle. So just like when we look at training and rehabilitation, all of our targets should be clear towards hypoxia and acidosis. Can we create a narrowing so all of these different individuals that specialize and care about all these different things, can they all be targeted to a biological resource that makes sense? Well, yes, I think that's what I think. That's what I'm making a video and you're watching. But now, AGTC, if that sounds familiar, you saw it in Jurassic World when it was clearly identified that all living things are made out of adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. That is what everything in the human body, if there are three things, so if it's not water, and that is clearly, I can make another video of this because instead of a ski slope, it's a water slide. A water slide might be the coolest thing in the world, but if there's no water, it's a miserable experience. So everything in the body works off of a water slide. That's why we must be well hydrated. I can do that video another time, but I think I might have just done it. More importantly, you have water, you have fat, and then everything else in the body is made out of proteins. Adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine. Tom Plummer is going to get real mad at me because I'm using big words. But at the end of the day, this is what the body is made out of. It's made out of proteins. And proteins are things you can eat. Proteins are the skiers on these slopes. And protein goes down this slope and lands in the total knee replacement healing. Because if you're going to heal a knee surgery, you have to develop new tissues. Well, those tissues don't just come out of nowhere. If you eat or supplement or however you want to put these nutrients into your body, and there's tons of little Lego pieces that go along with this message, but you don't just get new tissue. Like, this muscle doesn't get bigger just from lifting something heavy. In fact, nothing happens immediately other than blood flow or voluminization. Lifting weights creates a signal in your body that usually several hours later, and when you sleep, all of a sudden that signaling triggers what you put into your body or what might already be in your body to try to go here to either make that muscle bigger or stronger. So if you can then start to appreciate that all of these different things are going to be driven in the recovery process through protein, we need to make sure you're eating a lot of protein. I'm not going to give you the numbers because I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear some jerk somewhere who wouldn't be able to deadlift their way out of a paper bag that I'm somehow giving you nutrition advice. I'm going to tell you that you should go talk to that nutrition expert that is highly, highly credentialed and ask them. And maybe there should be some blood work to make sure that these guys, the kidneys, have no underlying pathology. Because even though I'm talking at a very, very blue sky rudimentary level, the blue sky that lives over the top of this ski slope, what we're talking about is starting to appreciate that if you don't have significant amount of protein, whatever your favorite nutrition expert says, what happens is that the muscle, the protein that you want to go into your muscle, goes to the bunny slope. Because if you're not eating enough, it will then take protein out of the muscle so you don't die. That process is called gluconeogenesis. It is so you don't die, and now you have tiny small muscles. Not because you weren't training hard, but because you didn't fuel your body. Now, additionally, you can start to think of, what do you eat next? You eat carbohydrates. Fats in this thought process are probably incidental. But now, if you are training hard, or you have pathology, which is basically having the body, idle at a 4 RPM, meaning you're having metabolic process to drive the healing process, the easiest and fastest way to fuel those processes is by glucose. Well, like I just said, you can get glucose by pulling muscle out of the skeletal. You can get glucose by pulling the protein out of the skeletal muscle. But you could also just eat carbs and not be afraid of them, because you'll use them fairly quickly. So this is where then, after you dial in with your nutrition expert to have a significant amount of protein, which then is going to fuel normal body changeovers. Every cell in your body was different 30 days ago. Well, how did that happen? Well, that's because our DNA does that, but it still needs some kind of substrate to create something that didn't exist 30 days before. That something is protein. And now if you have carbs going down these ski slopes, they're like carbs is the ski patrol. So if the ski patrol is everywhere, then everybody's nice and safe, and the protein gets to these key target areas. Because the carbs can be protein sparing. So now when you have hip surgery, you can get protein going to your hip to create new connective tissue. When you have enough carbs and you train, you use the carbs to fuel your energy, create the signaling, and when the signaling kicks in, the protein dives into your big quads, your chest, your traps, and your triceps. So this is where it's not like impossible to create those skeletal muscle gains, but in my world, when a lot of people are looking for this type of guidance when there's a surgery, then I'm not sure that it's a best idea. And that's where you can vet the other individuals that you work with so that everyone is on the same page. There may be some other way to describe this ski slope, and it's probably not even wrong. What would be really wrong and not benefiting the patient, the customer, the client is that, well, this person said this. Well, just because that's what they're best at doesn't mean the other people don't know anything. This is a dangerous, slippery slope. That's why I'm being very careful in what I'm saying, because I feel very strongly in what I'm talking about. But what I don't feel strongly about is that people always choose their team with a lot of like-minded individuals that can all target their weapons at the same structure, at the same pathology. Everybody should be doing what they do well, but if we have the ideal system, certainly sometimes certain interventions are going to hold precedent over others. If you have unrelenting back pain and there's no exercises that you can do to affect the humoral and hormonal impact of healing, well, then we definitely need a therapeutic approach for that individual. But they still need to eat, they still need to sleep. And we certainly know how sensitivity and the autonomic nervous system can be affected. So the bottom line is that there is no such thing as hypertrophy without eating. And there's no such thing as healing without eating. And you could also say the same thing about sleeping. You could say the same thing about psychology. And you can say the same thing about load management. Maybe in the general population, load management is what we consider largely social stress. Load management, obviously a very popular term in elite sport during how much you actually play. And then that can become a quagmire because it's not always including how much you practice. And even if it does, putting shots up after practice for 2 hours, that counts too. Everything comes out of the same biological bag. And when that bag starts to have 4 pounds of poop, but it's only a 3-pound bag, there's a prioritization. The prioritization of protein is so you don't die. Secondly, is so that this orthopedic pathology doesn't become something more and kill you. And then the last one actually becomes the skeletal muscle. I hope that all makes sense. I do know when certain organisms have a long life, especially when they're looking for that pot of gold, you're going to look for that leprechaun, and you're going to look for it in the Crichton section of Mobile, Alabama. And if you do see that leprechaun, say, yeah. You have a good opportunity to create a very dramatic effect that can lock in and allow you to throw something real big over your head.